Hi guys, welcome to Adulting 101, where we try to take some tasks that you might need as being a grown-up that you may not have learned in school or as you were growing up, and try to make them a little simple and easy for us to get by on. So today in Adulting 101, we're going to talk about buttons and hems. And this is something we don't need to go find a tailor for. It's something that doesn't necessarily even have to be all that pretty, but it's a nice skill that you need to know how to have. So we're going to start today by talking about buttons. All right, materials you need to sew on a button is you're going to need the button. You're going to need thread, a needle, and you're going to need, depending on the type of button you're using, a toothpick, or it can be another needle, a straight pin, something that you're using, they call it a shank or just for leverage, and you'll probably want a pair of scissors. This is the first type of button that we're going to look at sewing on, and this one is one that would need that little shank that we were talking about. So your first step in doing this is obviously going to be to thread the needle and to make a knot, and here in a minute I'll show you a way to do that. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to make a mark where you want that button to be, and you're going to place your button on that mark with the holes lining up parallel to the button. You're going to bring your needle through the fabric from the underside, up through one hole and down through the other. And I'm going to show you this in just a second. So then you insert the needle into another hole and through the fabric layers. So that's what's happening there in figure 1. They brought the needle up and then they're going back through the hole. All right. So then they're going to get to figure 2 where they're going to slide that toothpick or needle, straight pin, whatever in the way. And then they're just going to continue to sew it around. So they'll make, I don't know, about 4 or so loops holding that in place. What this is doing is giving a little bit of leverage for the button to be able to go through the hole. So then in the third one here, we're going around the bottom, and that's going to help secure it so that it's easier to get through the buttonhole and give it that little bit of room. So we're going to try to do this here for you and show you how that goes. All right, let's give this a go. So what I have here today is I got this little kit here, and it's 99 cents at Walmart, or it was when I bought it. And the thing that's missing right here is probably something I'm going to wish I had today, but it's a needle threader. And you use it, you put it through the eye of the needle, put your thread in, pull it out, and it makes starting the needle so much easier. So we're going to use this little kit to try to sew a button onto just a scrap piece of fabric that I have lying around my house. So I'm going to grab my button. And it came with 2 of them, nice and tiny. And we're going to get a needle, which I have right here. And it's kind of hard to see if I can hold it down, but it does have a very small eye there that we'll need to thread. And because I want you to be able to see what we're doing, I have black material so that we can see. I'm going to grab white thread for us to use. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to thread the needle. So some people will tell you need to lick the end of it. And what that does is it just makes all the hairs, the threads all stay together in one. You don't have to do it if you're that eye. If you're using the threader, it's probably not required. And I got it on my first shot, guys. It's probably the first time that's ever happened. So you just put it in that eye. The next thing we need to do is tie a knot at the end. And you can do this anyway. You can just wrap it around your finger, which is what I have done. And then I'm just going to put the thread through my loop and pull. So I've got the end, there's this, pull. I'm going to slide my needle or my loop towards the end. That made a little itty bitty knot. You can barely see it, but it's enough that it'll get caught on the threads. Another way I've seen done is if you take the needle and you hold some material to it and you wrap it around, slide it around, and then drag it down to the end. It'll make a knot. Take it as you want. All right. On the directions, they told us to use a toothpick. In the book I got it from, it said you could use a needle, anything basically. What you're doing is you're giving it strength. So I'm just going to use another. It's got a little ball on the end, but it's just a straight pin. So before you start sewing the needle onto there, you will have marked your fabric where you want it to be. based on the button. So you may pull it underneath so you can see where the button needs to come through and put a little dot or something there. So then you're going to take your button, you're going to put it on the right side of your fabric, the side you want it to be on. Your needle, you're going to go from underneath the fabric, the back side. So I'm on the back side. There's the button on the front side. All right, so I'm going to go through the back side and come up through the hole. And then you're going to come back down, and you should do this once or twice, just enough to get it going. So there you can see I've got it through once. I'm going to do it through again. This time when I come up, I'm going to take this straight pin or whatever, a straight pin, toothpick, and I'm going to place it, my material is awfully wrinkly, in between the button, or in between the holes, and hold it there. And all I'm doing is providing a little bit of slack. When you put the button on, you want the button to go through the fabric. So you need to have a little bit of room here for the button to sit on. So now I'm just going to sew it about 4 more times, just coming up and over. And then I'm going to go back through the other side. Pull it out. And do it again. Going through the back side to come out through the front. I'm going over the straight pin. Come back through the other side. And you're going to do this about 4 or 5 times. So that was 2. I want to make sure I keep my thread in front of my straight pin. I don't want to get it below it. And now that I've got that part on there, I can take my straight pin out. And now I'm going to look at this area on the right side of our fabric underneath the button. So where it's coming out. And we're going to make kind of a shank. So I need to come up through the back of this material, but I'm not going to go through the buttonhole. See, I'm kind of in between the button. I'm going to come out so that I can then wrap my thread 2 or 3 times around the bottom of the button. All right. And then we can make a knot. And I like my knots to be on the back side, so I'm going to go back below to make the knot. So I'm back to the back side of my thread. So you can see here on the back. On the directions, it said you can make a bunch of several stitches. I never trust that, just because when I wash my clothes, it pulls loose. So what I tend to do is use the thread that I started with here, that's sticking up, and this thread, and I'm going to knot them together, and that way the knot will stay there, and our button will be sewn in place, and there it is. And these little kits are great because look, it came with 2 buttons in it. The thread I took the thread out when I was pulling it off. It's over here. All right. I've got a couple emergency little kits. I keep one of these in my desk drawer at work. So, you know, if you're ever at the library and you need a button, there's probably an extra one there. Now, the second type of button here, I don't have a display one for, so we're just going to kind of walk through this one. It's similar to what we just did. So we're going to thread the needle again. We're going to make a knot on the end again. We're going to place that button on that mark again. This time we're going to secure it with the thread on the right side of the garment with the small stitch under the button. So what they did is they started going through the buttonhole and then coming out on the other end to go through the material. So you can see here there's a loop in the hole before they go down through the material. Then they bring the needle down through the material, they come back up and they go through that hole again. And you can see it right here. They're going to continue to do that in the same manner as I did the other button until they get to the end, like 4 or 5 stitches, then they'll knot it off. Now let's take a minute or so and talk about some hems. So hems can be done by hand or they can be done by machine, and there's a couple of different stitches you can use both ways. So the only difference between all of them is basically your preference and what kind of material you use. If you're following a pattern, sometimes the patterns will call for certain ways versus others. So this first one is a blind stitch, and I want to show you real quick that this right here where it's showing the zigzag, that zigzag is not the hem. That is just something they put on the end of the material to keep it from fraying. So what they've done here is they folded the material up 1/4 of an inch, and we're going to show you this one too. They make a small anchoring stitch, and then they work with the needle pointing in the direction they are going, and they take a small stitch and grab just 3 or 4 little threads of the material, and then they go to the other side about 1/4 inch, grab 3 or 4 threads again, come back to the other side, and they do that all the way around. You try not to pull it too tightly, otherwise you're going to end up with like jogging pants cuffs around the bottom, and you want them to stay straight. So you can make sure they stay even and not the other way. So let's take a second here and see what that looks like. All right, what it doesn't tell you on the hemming page is that ironing is probably one of the big things that's going to help you. And my piece of material, if you can see it, is very much not ironed. There's our button we put on earlier. But if you iron it in place, that's going to help a lot. The other thing is when you're looking at it and you see that zigzag stitch, that has nothing to do with the hem. That's what they put in there, because I don't know if you can tell here at the tip, but there's some fraying that's happening on our material. So I put that zigzag stitch in to try to help the fraying from happening. And that's all that is. So the actual hem that they've got in there isn't that much. So once you've measured out your hem and you know how much you're going to do, you're going to fold your material to that length, and then you're going to iron it and press it. Once you iron and press it, it should hold there. Another thing you can do to be sure that it stays there is by grabbing straight pins. I have a whole bunch of them over here. And putting it through your material in the spot where you want it to be. And that'll hold it in place until you can get the stitch in there. So when you are hemming, you are working in this area right here in between the two materials. So again, you'll want to hem the same color as your material, but so that we can see, I have white thread, black material. So you're going to take your thread, you'll measure out quite a bit because you want it to go all the way around. You're going to thread your needle. We're going to make the knot at the end. Again, it doesn't matter what kind of knot you make, just as long as there's a knot there to keep it from passing through. This first one that is shown, the blind stitch, is fairly easy because you're just going back and forth and working in that direction. So I have right here my material. I'm taking my needle and I'm just going to go in between, and I'm going to grab just a couple threads of, here we go, just a couple threads of the material I'm hemming, and I'm going to pull my needle through. For the first stitch, we're going to keep the needle moving in the direction we want it. So once we've got it through, you are then going to go up, I don't know, about 1/4 inch, and then grab just a couple of the other side. So if we look here, we can see that now I've grabbed a couple of stitches on the other side. And I'm going to pull my needle through. And that's going to close it up. And you keep working in that fashion. So now I'm going to grab it on the other side. I'm going to grab just a couple stitches. Pull my needle through. Come forward a little further. Grab a couple from the other side. Bring it back out. So if we look here in the center, we can see it's just zigzagging back and forth. When you pull it tight, it holds it down. So you can see my one little stitch there on this side. So your stitches should be about 1/2 inch apart on either side. And you would normally use the same color thread as your material. I didn't because I want you to see what's happening. So we can see again, it's just zigzagging back and forth if I pull this up. When I pull it tight, you see our stitches are about 1/2 inch apart. The more often you do this, the better it's going to end up looking because they'll be even. Mine are sloppy because I'm trying to work and show you. But if I was paying attention to what I was doing, I would try to keep my stitches very even in the same area across. Sometimes you can even take like a white pencil and mark it to make sure it stays on the same line. So that's the first stitch. Our next stitch is the blind cat stitch. This one is very, very similar to the one that we just did, except for our needle's going to work in the opposite direction. So I don't know if you could tell, but it looks like they were actually hemming this way on that. And by the way, that varies whether you're right-handed or left-handed, whether you move in this direction or you move in this direction. So they're working this way, but you notice their needle is pointing the opposite direction. This is personally my favorite way to hem. So this stitch right here, again, I don't want you to be confused. This one is just to keep the material from fraying. And they've used scissors to do the zigzag stitch on there. And then at the bottom, they just want the material to stay in place. And then they're demonstrating the hem. They grab their 3 or 4 threads of the material, go forward a couple inches, grab 3 or 4 threads of material, forward a couple inches. And we're going to take just a minute to show what that looks like. All right, the second stitch is the blind cat stitch, catch stitch. This one is almost identical to the other one, except for in the first one, we kept our needle pointed in the same direction we were going the whole time. This time, we are going to move in this direction, but we're making our stitches in this direction. So I'm going to grab just a couple here in the center to pull through and get us started. It's hard to see when my hands are in the way. I can't sew backwards. All right, so I pulled my stitch out this way, but now I'm going to go this way a 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to grab just a couple. I'm going to pull my needle through. And now I'm going to go down about another 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to grab a couple again. Couple threads, pull my needle through, and then move again. I think that this makes a little bit of a tighter or more secure stitch, moving in the opposite direction. Again, it's personal preference, the type of material you're using, which one you're actually going to go with. Personally, this is the one I use more often than not. So there you can see there's my stitches. This right here is just my knot. And put it up in the center. But you can see there's the stitches on both sides again. It looks the same on the outside. The only difference is our stitches on the inside go backwards. All right, so that's the second stitch they talk about. The last hand sewn one is a slip stitch, and this one, I'll admit my demonstration is probably not going to be up to par on. I find this one to be a little bit tedious. But this one, we folded our material, and this one looks like they folded it again because they have just a folded edge at the top rather than the blind edge that we were having before, or raw edge as they call it. So what they're doing is they are trying to make it blind so it's only, you don't really see it. So you have the small stitch that you anchor the thread. You work with the needle pointing in the direction that you were going. They're going this way on that. You're going to bring it to the outside in this seam line. The seam line is here in the center. So they brought it right here on the outside of the seam line. If you're right-handed, you work from right to left, work from left to right. You insert the needle into the fold just behind where the thread come up and run it inside the fold for about a 1/4 inch. Then bring the needle out, draw the thread snug, and take your next stitch in the opposite direction. So when this one's done, the material's folded on either side so you don't see the stitch. So we're going to kind of try to see what that looks like in the next one. All right, this last stitch they talk about is called slip stitching. And to me, this one's kind of tedious. But we still have our material here, still penned, still should be ironed. All right, we're going to be working here in the center again. But this time we are making a lot of little stitches forward and back. And so for this one, I'm just kind of, I don't know if you can see it, going back and forth a lot. And then I'm going to pull my needle through in the center. What this stitch is really good for is not so much hemming as much as if you have two sections that you're trying to bring together. So if I had hands or something that I had two different sides I wanted to look like they were put together without a seam, that's where I would use this from, because this is going to make all the little Z's come back and forth really quick together in quick succession. And it's tedious, it takes a long time, but for some materials that are stretchy, you might want those stitches because then I'll have a little more give than some of these further ones. My stitches on the outside are very sloppy. So that's that one. I didn't bring a sewing machine in for our hemming demonstration today, but we are going to next month do a Sewing Machine 101 class. So kind of showing you the basics and how to get started with that. But if you do have a sewing machine and you're somewhat proficient with it, you may use that for your hems as well. They make much more even hems. There's about 3 stitches here that talk about hems. So this is the machine blind stitch, and this one you can see that they have folded the material again right here. This one's similar to the last hand stitched one we did, where they're allowing about 1/4 inch of the hem edge to extend under this foot. And they're going really close to the fold, catching 1 or 2 threads of the garment. And when it's complete, they'll take the hem out, press it flat, and you notice right here you barely see anything. The next one is the double fold hem. This one shows 1 or 2 rows of straight stitches showing on the right side. You turn under the double fold hem. The stitch along the inner fold and then repeat it on the outer fold if desired. This method is successful on straight edges where there's no excess or fullness to ease in. So you can see they've got it really close to the edge and then they've got it again a little bit further. The last one is the double needle hem, and I'll be honest, I will never show this to you because I don't have a double needle. But this one, you would actually have 2 rolls of thread secured through 2 needles going through to use this. Thank you guys for joining us today for this Adulting 101. I hope that you had much success with your buttons and your hems, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.